Hi everybody, I am Brian Mullins the Fox. For the first time ever, I will go deep and deeper into a conspiracy or a series of conspiracy theories in a series I dub Brian Mullins the Fox's Conspiracy Digs and Deep Dives. This brand spankin' new series will at best be going over one conspiracy or conspiracy theory per week, and at most I will cover somewhere between 3 to 6 mini or much smaller in scope conspiracies or conspiracy theories in a single episode per week. There is a long and documented history of doomsday prophecies, predictions, and prediction rates, most of which never came true, if not all of them turned out to be completely bogus. But the latest of which is simply known as Project Anchor, or the 7-second pause in Earth's gravity. I'm not entirely a believer, but I'm also not entirely a skeptic of the idea yet. But you never know until the time actually comes. And by the way, before I continue on any further, for each and every one of these singular big conspiracies, if there's more information that comes out or more lead up or potential as to whether or not if it's a hoax or if it's real, it'll be multi-parted, one part at a time. The first part will be introducing the conspiracy, the second part will be entertaining and arguing as to whether or not if it's a hoax, and the third and second to last part of the entire coverage each conspiracy gets will be entertaining as to whether or not if it's real, if there is reality and truth behind it. And hopefully the fourth and final part to each of these singular big conspiracies or conspiracy theories will conclude my coverage of it, and I will then objectively determine as to whether or not I take each of the two sides of this whole conversation about this. I don't exactly know who started this quote-unquote rumor, what the motive was in doing it, and why, but I might go into some detail there before I'm done summarizing and even scientifically entertaining it with mathematics and a bit of science here and there. It sounds interesting as fuck. Conspiracies in general are beginning to become my cup of tea, and there's no exact way of knowing for absolute certainty as to whether or not this will happen. It is yet to be determined, just like any and all other doomsday prophecies and predictions in the past. And to start us all off on the right note in the series, we will now be going somewhat deep into the 7-second pause in Earth's gravity. And no, Earth's gravity isn't going away forever, and people need to stop fucking implying that. Before I get somewhat deeper into it, the possibility of such an event, let alone Project Anchor, is being dismissed, deemed false, fake, and labeled as a conspiracy theory and a hoax by many sources, including the powers that be, NASA. The main claim about the 7-second long pause in Earth's gravity, if it's not riddled with intentionally added bits of misinformation, is that by August 12th, 2026, at 14:33 UTC or 8:33 a.m. Central Standard Time or 9:33 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, two black holes would emit gravitational waves that would temporarily cancel out Earth's gravity for exactly 7 seconds. Not about eclipses, but about black holes. The quote-unquote experts that be have warned that if such an event occurs, everything and or anything that isn't anchored strong enough or is not in a stable enough building to remain on Earth will float upwards by 15 to 20 meters into the air before crashing back down to Earth when gravity returns. It is very funny that they would have to warn you all of this if this were to never happen at all. And it is also very funny that they call this a combination of real astronomical events with fictional science. It's ironic that people dismiss this potentially life-altering event as false and filled with misinformation if they're the fucking ones, and only ones, spreading the most of it. Let's get straight into the numbers and entertain this for a beat whilst debunking some misinformation. Number one, most importantly, the quote-unquote 15 to 20 meters in feet estimate, which is between 49 feet and 2.551 inches and 65.6168 feet. So the first blatant piece of actual misinformation is this: 15 to 20 meters isn't going to put it into perspective at all for shit. And clearly the ambiguity and inability to verify numbers like the 15 to 20 meters range is what makes shit like this impossible to cover. Without knowing for sure what actual misinformation is being used, who's using it solely for the purpose of either misinforming or disinforming, why they're doing it, and why they would make it so fucking easy for social media platforms and entities to silence and censor any one of us for even entertaining it in the slightest. By the way, Earth's gravity rate is 9.8 meters per second squared. So if the 7-second part were to be true in the somewhat distant future, this much I do know. The final velocity is going to be 68.6 meters per second, and the total distance traveled starting from rest is 240.1 meters, not 15 to 20. So how many feet is 240.1 meters exactly? 787 feet and 8.756 inches, and that's just most of everything that isn't anchored to anything like people that aren't in structurally sound buildings, cars, mobile homes, and buildings without a proper foundation, for example. What will it do to entire power grids, power lines, societies that are highly advanced with this technology? How many people will die, etc.? What about the anchors themselves? Or the foundations that be in any building or structure? And if they're not anchored to anything themselves and they have weak-ass foundations, they will fall with the rest, unless they're in the water. This effect will also affect all bodies of water to some extent. Lakes, ponds, rivers, and even entire oceans with quintillions of gallons from one continent to the other. What if it affects the heaviest and biggest ships out in the sea, only by making it jump in and out of the water as the water jumps in and out? And when it comes to how many people who may die, how many cars will be totaled, how many buildings will be completely destroyed, how much in US dollars of damage, and how much in all the other currencies of damage will every other country in the world face and deal with, and how many homes exactly will be deemed permanently uninhabitable, we will never know for sure. What the holy fuck would it even do to Earth's ozone layer? Why else would NASA and governing bodies want to cover such an initiative up if it were to be a hoax, and if they cared about us, which they really don't, because NASA covers anything scientific when it comes to Earth, solar system, anything related to planets, gravity, etc. But I can go on for fucking ever with even more questions to boot that I won't ask in this episode, but I've got at least 3 of them here about all of this. Number 1, what is Project Anchor? Supposedly, it is a quote-unquote leaked NASA document that describes an $89 billion initiative to prepare for the 7-second-long gravitational failure that might put Earth permanently out of orbit by a slight degree. It doesn't tell me when the supposed leak happened, nor does it tell me why. But if this leak is or was real, that's a good thing. Number 2, what is the motive behind Project Anchor? Exactly. To usher out plans for the rich and utmost powerful within NASA and other organizations and governing bodies on how to prepare for the potentially inevitable 7-second-long event, leaving the middle-class, poor, and not-so-privileged public to be shit out of luck, and only leaving the elites to be alive, if that ever were to come to fruition the way they wanted, allegedly. Hence why the supposed leak needed to have happened in the first place if it were real. And finally, number 3, who the hell is the one behind not just the so-called rumor, but also Project Anchor itself, the document as well? I really do not know, but it's someone who's been anonymous to begin with and should remain that way. And no, I'm not going to be pointing fingers or wagging any tails to find out who, because that's cruel. Also, all I'm sure of is that people in skyscrapers, in giant metropolitan, and even cosmopolitan cities will be mostly fine because those tall-ass buildings have some kind of structural control and anchoring. What if the glass windows on said tall-ass buildings aren't tightly secure onto the buildings themselves, or stay in place when this 7-second event takes place? It might be one singular event that brings us to total nuclear and non-nuclear fallout all over the world, not just America. But I think the whole point of building a $21 trillion underground shelter, the size of an entire cosmopolitan city, is to safeguard the elites, and only them, from events just like this, leaving everyone else in its wake. And here's my take on all of this. At the end of the day, whether it happens or not is not something that should be up for debate in the long run. It's who calls what misinformation, how we should stop giving these fuckers power, and how to regain whatever amount of it they wrongly took away from us. Not just you and I. And trust me, I've covered the deepest, most depraved fucked up shit in the past. And this series is what will drive me away from that. This series, I will do my damnedest and best in driving myself into covering safer and more interesting topics, much less conspiracy theories and conspiracies themselves. The ones I've already talked about before this video is fucking dead and irrelevant. And finally, before I sign out, to get this weekly routine of content out of the way, let me know what conspiracy or conspiracy I should cover the next week in this poll for the next episode. Thank you all for watching. This has been episode 1 of Brian Mullins the Fox's Conspiracy Digs and Deep Dives. I have been your host, Brian Mullins the Fox, signing out. See you all next time with another episode in hopefully the next week. Bye-bye.